All right, so today we are going to be talking about square measure and area of rectangles and squares. Last week we talked about perimeter, and I talked about perimeter being the outside edge. Like remember on the basketball court, it would be the out of bounds line would be like the perimeter of the basketball court. Or if you were going to fence your yard, it would be what you needed to measure to put a fence up in your yard. It's the perimeter, the outside edge. When we talk about area, it's all the space inside of the perimeter, whatever's inside. So if you think about our classroom and you think about that tile floor we have in there, you would have to know the area of that floor to be able to put that tile down. Or even on our math bulletin board in our classroom, remember I had the giant word area on the inside. The perimeter was that outside edge, the border. The area was everything inside of it. So when we talk about area, you're talking about the inside part of something. So if you look at the actual definition of area, it's the number of square units that cover a surface. And square measures can be both metric and customary. Remember we talked about that. Customary is what we use here in the United States. Inch, feet, yard. Metric is what most of the world uses besides us. Centimeters, kilometers, grams, things like that. So square measures can be in both metric and customary units. But when we talk about area, it's always squared. Every single time you have a label, it's squared. Every single time. Centimeters squared, inches squared, feet squared, meters squared. We always, when we talk about area, have to have the squared symbol or the word squared is how you're going to have to do it today. When we label area, area is always squared. Now, we're going to be talking about two different things today. Square measure is lesson 12.5 in your math book. It's on page 392. Just want you to open to that page because square measure I'm really not going to spend any time on, but I want you to take a look at it so you can see what I'm talking about here, and I'll even show you your homework on this one. Square measure, they give you the squares. So all you have to do is count them. That's it. There's nothing else to that. Just making sure that you're careful when you count. I'm not going to do the estimating on that today without really being able to show you how to do that. I'm not going to show you how to do that. So we're only going to focus on the top part of that homework today anyway, where you're actually just going to be counting the squares. So square measure, that's why it's called that. It actually shows you the squares and you can count them. So we're really not spending a whole lot of time on that. I'm going to be focusing on page 392, 393. So first we're going to take a look at area of a rectangle. And when we talk about the area of a rectangle, we have the formula first. Area equals length times width. Now when we typically write it, it looks like this. A equals, it's a cursive small l times W. That's just how they do length in area. For length, they use the cursive L. Area equals length times width. So if we take a look at this rectangle here, 4 yards, 2 yards, we're going to plug in our formula. Area equals 4 times 2. 4 is the length, 2 is the width. All I did was plug in my formula. So the area would equal 8 yards squared. We can't forget that square today when we're doing our homework. You guys will have to just type the word square since there's no little number 2 like that on your keyboards. So length times width, that's all we're doing there. Length times width. Not adding anything like you did perimeter. Remember, you had to add up the whole outside edge. We're not doing the perimeter. We're figuring out this inside space here, the area. So I'm multiplying, if it's a rectangle, length times width. That's all I did. I wrote the formula, I plugged in the formula, I solved the formula. Now, when you look at a square, we know that squares are the same all the way around. All 4 sides are the exact same. So it doesn't, you get one side, we know this is 3, this is 3. If I was doing the perimeter, I would add this up. Or I could even do 3 times 4. I could either do 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, or I do 3 times 4. Don't do that with area. Area of a square is side times side, which looks like this. Area equals S times S. Now all we're going to do is plug it in. We're not going to do 3 times 4. We're going to do one side is 3 times another side is 3. So the area of this square would be 9 meters squared. That's where we have to be careful with square. We're not doing 3 times 4, that would be perimeter. We have to do side times side. We're also not doing 3 times 2 because this side is not 2. This side is the same as this, which would be 3. So you gotta be really careful when you plug in these numbers today. Side times side. When you're doing a square, you should be multiplying the exact same number. 3 times 3, 9 meters squared. Again, we have to square our answers. I'm going to show you a couple examples on my board using decimals and fractions because you're going to have some of that on your homework today. So remember the area of a rectangle when we talked about it. Area equals length times width. That's the formula for that one. Here's my rectangle. My length is 7.5. My width is 4 meters. All right, so I'm going to start off writing the formula first. Area equals length times width. Then all I'm going to do is plug in my numbers. Area equals 7.5 times, I'm going to write it vertically because I'm not going to try to multiply this horizontally. So I'm going to write it that way. 7.5 times 4, all I did was plug in these numbers, length times width. Now I'm going to multiply like normal. I'm not going to worry about that decimal point yet. 5 times 4 is 20. Carry the 2. 4 times 7 is 28, plus 2 is 30. Now, it's not 300. I'm going to go back and take a look. How many numbers are behind a decimal point? Only 1. So in my answer, I know only 1 is going to be behind the decimal point. So the area of this one is going to be 30 meters squared. Now, today when you're doing your homework, it'll look like this. You're just going to type the word squared. Or you can do square meters. Either way. You could also do 30 square meters. Same thing. Okay, all right. Length times width on rectangles. Let's do one more rectangle here and then we'll look at the square. If I have, we'll do 2 decimals. 7.3 centimeters, 3.1 centimeters. Okay. Area, I know, I'm going to write the formula first. Length times width. Then all I'm going to do is fill in my formula. Area equals, what's my length? 7.3. What's my width? Again, I'm going to write this vertically, guys. 3.1. I'm going to ignore those decimal points until I'm done multiplying. Not even going to act like they're there. 3 times 1 is 3. 1 times 7 is 7. Cannot forget that magic 0. Since I'm starting in the tens, I have to start in the tens. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 7 is 21. I'm going to add those up. 3 plus 0 is 3. 9 plus 7 is 16. 1 plus 1 is 2. And then I have a 2. Now, I need to figure out where my decimal goes. How many numbers do I have behind a decimal? I see 1 here. I see 1 here. So that's a total of 2 numbers behind the decimal. Well, if I have 2 numbers behind the decimal here, I have to have 2 numbers behind the decimal here. So I know my area is going to be 22.63 square centimeters. I'm going to write it like that. Normally you would write it like this on your homework assignment, but since we're actually handwriting it, we're going to do it like this today. Square centimeters or centimeters squared. We cannot forget we're squaring area. All right, let's take a look at squares. Scoot this over. All right, so I know the area of a square, side times side. I got to remember I'm not doing times 2. I'm not doing times 4. I'm doing side times side. Got to be really careful with that. All right, so if I have the area is side times side, if you always start with your formula, like we did on perimeter, then all you have to do is plug in your numbers. Area equals 8.5 times 8.5. It's the same thing. 8.5 times 8.5. Okay, I can't multiply like this. I have to make them improper fractions first. So I'm going to have 8 times 2 is 16. Plus 1 is 17 over 2 times 8 times 2 is 16 plus 1 is 17 over 2. Okay. Now, I have to look and see if I can cross-reduce anywhere. And it doesn't look like I can do any cross-reducing here. I don't like this one at all. This one's not very fun. Okay, so we're gonna have to go ahead and multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. And I'm gonna have to do 17 times 17 out to the side because I'm not gonna be able to do that in my head. So let's put 17 times 17 out to the side. 7 times 7 is 49. I'm gonna carry my 4. 7 times 1 is 7 plus 4 is 11. I'm going to put my 0 and cross off my 4 because I don't want to use it again. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 7 is, or 1 times 1 is 1. I'm going to add those up. 9, 8, 2. Okay, sorry. So now I know I have 289 over 4. Well, I can't leave it like that. That would be an improper fraction. So I'm going to do inside, outside. I'm going to erase this so you can see my inside, outside. Inside, outside. 4 can go into 28 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. I'm going to subtract. I'm going to bring down. 4 can go into 9 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. I'm going to subtract. 9 minus 8 is 1. So I'm left with a mixed number. Area equals 72 and 1/4. Normally it would look like this, feet squared. But today you guys are going to write square feet, or you can write out feet squared. That's how your label is going to look today, square feet. So just to remind you, I did one with a fraction, just to remind you that when you multiply fractions, we have to make them into improper fractions. You can't multiply them like that. You have to turn them into this. Hopefully on some of them you can cross reduce, but if you can't, you're just gonna have to do regular inside. That really wasn't that bad though, inside, outside. So an area, side times side for squares. All right, let's take a look at your homework. You need both workbook pages 137 and 138. We'll take a look at those. I'm going to start with 137 first. I'm only going to have you do 1 through 6 on these. I'm not going through that bottom, the estimating part of them today. So you only have to do the top 6. This is a matter of counting how many squares are there and writing the answer. Here's my only suggestion so you don't make a mistake on these. As you're counting them, put a little mark in the box so you know you've counted that box. Just count them that way. Put a little slash in each box as you count. That way you don't double count a box or miss a box. And then literally you're writing how many there are, and you just write it in there. Now on your homework, you're gonna have to put inches squared or square inches. You can type it either way, but you're gonna have to type out the word squared. Don't forget that. I did put it in the directions for you to remind you. That's it on 137. Those 6 should be pretty quick. All right. When we look at 138, 1 through 4 are all rectangles. So you're going to use length times width on these, length times width. Just fill in the formula, write the formula, fill in the numbers, and then do the multiplying. Multiply vertically though, guys, on these to make it easier. Number 3 and number 1, though, you can leave those horizontal. Both of those have fractions. So both of those, you're going to have to make this one and both of these into improper fractions and then cross reduce if you can. Doesn't look like you can. And then do inside outside. On this one, there's only 1. So you're going to have to make this improper and put this guy over 1. Okay? Put this over 1 and then do your problem. Then when we get to 5, 6, 7, and 8, you are doing the area of a square. So you're going to write the formula. Area equals side times side. Plug in your numbers, 13 times 13. Then you're going to multiply them and put in the answer, 9 times 9. Same thing here, you're going to have to make both of these improper before you can multiply them. Don't forget your squared answer. On 9 through 16, there's no pictures, but you should be able to tell whether it's a rectangle or a square because squares will only give you one side. rectangles, it's gonna give you two sides. So if it's a rectangle, if you have two numbers, you're gonna do length times width. You're gonna multiply those two numbers together. If you only have one number, you're gonna multiply that number twice, 6 1/8 times 6 1/8, okay? So again, square labels on these. I put that in your directions so you didn't forget.